Eo Arana. My name is Bob McDavitt, and I work for metbob.com. And I have been invited to help you to sail from Borabora to Niue. The World Cruising Club has picked the correct time of the year for sailing across the South Pacific for you. The cyclone season normally ends at the beginning of May, and it's not too bad a time of the year to sail from Borabora to Niue. However, I'd like to first introduce you to some of the terms that we use to describe the weather around the South Pacific. Welcome to the Pacific Ocean. Here is an average week of rainfall over the Pacific Ocean, and you can see there is this well-defined intertropical convergence zone just north of the equator. The equator is there, and the Tropic of Capricorn is down here. Yep. We can see the equator to the north and the Tropic of Capricorn just south of Fiji. Out on the eastern side of the Pacific Ocean is a fairly constant anticyclone or high pressure system which sits in this area and rotates in a counterclockwise fashion. There's another one that normally is migrating from Australia along around about 45 south across New Zealand. These isobars show you a typical weather pattern, and the black lines are the upper stream field, which generally goes from west to east, south of the Tropic of Capricorn, and whereas there's not much steering at all further north in the tropics. This high pressure out here creates an area of divergent northeast winds, which blow pretty well across French Polynesia towards Samoa. South of Fiji, we have some fairly persistent trade winds which blow as southeasterlies. They are modified by the anticyclones that travel further south. Between these two zones, there is convergence. The northeasterly winds go and bump into the southeasterly trade winds, creating the South Pacific Convergence Zone. The South Pacific Convergence Zone is, as I say, modified by how the high pressures move across the roaring 40s. So the line which connects one high system to the other high system across the South Pacific is called the subtropical ridge. The subtropical ridge. And south of the subtropical ridge, we have these transient troughs which go from west to east. They create zones of westerly winds and southerly southwesterly winds. These southwesterly winds from the Southern Ocean produce lots of swell, which can migrate all the way northeastwards across the South Pacific. Sometimes these anticyclones are so intense, they have lots of isobars on the weather map on their northern side. And these isobars often bunch together in the tropics, creating what we call squash zones. So the weather in a squash zone is caused by the extra enhancement of the trade winds on the northern side of a passing high. The weather in a squash zone consists of swells which are being bunched together, so they are choppier than normal, and also an area of strong winds. We don't want to sail in a squash zone. Now here is a large high with lots of isobars on its northern side, and as you can see, if you have a look at the satellite imagery, the cloud is moulded around the anticyclone. If you take away the cloud itself and have a look at the infrared image, you can see the rain bands are concentrated also on a line around the periphery of the anticyclone. There are isobars bunched together in squash zones in the tropics and also in the transient troughs. If you have a look at this typical part of the South Pacific convergence zone and X-ray it so as to see where it's raining, you'll notice that there are normally some places where the activity is thunderstorms and they have lightning, these little bolts here of lightning, but they don't cover the whole South Pacific convergence zone. They're just in places like nuggets. So here we are in Borabora, number 1, and we want to go west-southwest to Niue, number 2. However, there is a convergence zone lurking to the west and south of French Polynesia. The trip is 1,033 nautical miles. So what shall we do? So we go from the dot to the arrowhead. Now, this is the Met Service streamline and isobar analysis as of Monday morning, and we see there is a squash zone out to the south of French Polynesia. There's that convergence zone sitting just lingering to the south, and the South Pacific Convergence Zone is sitting well away over the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu area. But as we go from Borabora to Niue, we do have to cross the convergence zone. So what is the best way to go? So here we are at the start of our journey. Here we go. Now I move this now so that we can see the little blue triangle, red triangle, moving to the west-southwest of Borabora. As it goes, proceeding through the hours, which are located here in the top left over here. And we shall go west-southwest until we encounter the showers of the convergence zone. And we can, at this point, work out a system which will kind of balance the winds east of this point to west of this point. At this point, we will have some showers, that's true, squally zone, but we will minimize our time in the squally zone. And while we approach this zone, the winds will change from easterly here to northeasterly there. And then at this point, the winds will turn possibly southwesterly, but we can cope with that. Maybe we could heave to, or we could just go north for a while. And then further on, as we proceed, the winds will turn southeasterly. There may be some more showers that will move to the north of us. What I've done here is I've merged a couple of models, so you'll get to see both, so we can avoid the worst of both by following this line. And as we go along this line, that little red triangle, will finally arrive in Niue, and it will possibly occur a westerly change just at the time of arrival. But we would have accomplished the mission with, let's have a look at the winds along the route. East-southeast, easterly, northeasterly, a swing to southwest perhaps, and then southeasterly all the way to Niue. Not too bad, and it only requires one waypoint. And so it comes to this, the voyage forecast. Wind in knots, the swell in meters, and the drift in knots as well. The wind is in green. As we leave Borabora, we have an easterly until we come towards the approaching convergence zone. It turns into a northerly here and then swings to a southwesterly. And the southwesterly increases and turns into a southeasterly, which will help us to get to Niue. It peaks at around just over 20 knots on the approach to Niue. The swell in significant meters in purple, and it's there 2.5 meters when we leave, but it drops off as we approach the convergence zone. And then after the showers, it increases up to 3.5 meters, but it's aft and it has a long period of about 8 seconds or so. So it's rolling around at a time when the wind is about 20 knots. It's a bit rocky, but only for a short time. And then it eases off for our approach to Niue. The drift, well, it's there. It's on our tail and it's between 0 and 1 meters. And so I say to you, bon voyage. And that magic waypoint is 18 degrees, 13 minutes south, 18.5 south, and 158 degrees west. So it's located, as you can see here, about 100 nautical miles to the northeast of Aitataki. And so that is the strategy for this course. As an addendum, know that drift is between 0 and 1 knots, not meters. Anyway, all the best. E Rana, bon voyage.